what's new and exciting with you? Tell us a little bit about what's going on with you these days.
Sure. Let's see. So I'm doing commentary for Professional Fighters League. We have our finals coming up the day after Thanksgiving.
Mm.
The fighters will be fighting for $1 million. That will be on an ESPN pay-per-view. So that's a lot of fun, calling the fights with Sean O'Connell and Randy Couture. And I got BattleBots coming up on Discovery Channel. I'm going to Vegas in a couple days to go film season 7 of BattleBots.
Wow.
Still doing the podcast with John Anik. Just started a new business where I've been going around to different places all over the country, teaching the integration of pistol and martial arts, which has been fun to both civilian and law enforcement. Been working hard on that. And just kind of being a dad, got 2 kids and having a good time, man.
That's awesome. So where are you based out of now?
So now I'm in North Carolina. So
okay.
I was in LA for, almost 10 years, about 9 years. And then, in October 2020, moved to the Carolinas. So been here in Charlotte, since April
Wow.
2020.
I've been a big fan of, watching you fight over the years, right? I've seen, some serious battles that you've been in. But I want you to tell us, was there a battle that if you could pick something to do a rematch right now, who and you still had the body that you used to, who would it be? Who would you go back head toe to toe with?
Yeah. I think that BJ Penn was one of those where I felt like I wasn't able to really show what I was able to do. And I also feel that when we fought, I thought that he had advantages in certain areas that really exposed my weaknesses. So that was an awesome fight for me because even though I lost and it didn't go well, I learned a lot from that. And I guess that was one fight that I wish I could have been able to do a rematch or something like that. But that said, it was one of those fights where I learned a lot and knew what I had to do to step up my game training wise, technically, and realized I needed to get much better sparring partners. And that's kind of where the shift happened, where I started training with the boys in Montreal over at TriStar.
Mm. Outside of taking more Nutrabolics, which you should have to fight BJ Penn,
Exactly.
Right? Outside of that, what would you do differently? We got the sparring partners. Is there any other sort of unique training or things that you would have put into place, like now that what would you have done differently?
Yeah, great question. I think that I wasn't really being pushed jiu-jitsu wise. Like, it was just my brother and that was it. Like, I didn't really have a whole lot of training partners. So I wasn't being pushed in areas that was, forcing me to try to adapt and get better. You train with the same people over and over, and sometimes you gain too much respect or you just keep doing the same things over and over again. And repetitive behaviors can be dangerous in some ways, and it can be good, but can also be dangerous in some ways because you get caught in patterns, you don't get outside of your comfort zone, and then you don't grow. So that was a major issue. I also think my boxing really wasn't where it should have been. My footwork, and especially my jab my footwork was pretty good, but my jab was really non-existent. It was okay, but it really needed to be much sharper. If I need to establish a certain distance, and I want to set up punches and I want to set up angles, right distance, and the jab gets a lot of that done. And I felt like my jab wasn't really very developed up until that point. And that was something I really worked hard on as I moved forward. And, the jab really is kind of the glue of a lot of your boxing. I'm not the first to say that necessarily, but it really is what links all the other punches together. Once you're able to find your range with your jab, you can then land, my left hand, in my case, you can land your cross. So, that was, or those were some of the things that I really worked on. I also think my wrestling was not where it should have been. So there were a lot of things, that I felt that I learned in that fight against BJ Penn.
Mm. Out of all of the training camps that you've been in, right, and I know you've been, to many training camps, who and where would you say the toughest training camp is for yourself? Like, give us some insight on that.
Yeah, sure. I would say both of my fights, when I had to cut all the way to 145 pounds, when I fought at featherweight, were extremely difficult because I was not only dealing with a heavy training load, but I was restricting a lot of calories. And also, you know, it was at a time, let's see, 2010, 2011, where, you know, again, as you know, the information about nutrition, the information about diet is always getting better. And we're at a completely different place in 2022 than we were when we were in 2010 even. You know, it happens so fast. So in some ways, you know, back then when you were cutting weight, it was a good process, but it wasn't a great process. We were still learning about it. And to a certain extent, I'm sure we're still learning about it right now, but it was more of like, I was the guinea pig back then. And I felt that whether it was, you know, energy wise, I didn't feel great, or strength wise, I didn't feel great because of the brutal weight cuts. That just compounded everything else for the training camp. So when I fought Diego Nunes in Vancouver, and when I fought Jose Aldo in Houston, those camps in particular were grueling. It was great because I was able to prove to myself that I could push harder than ever, and I could take on an insane training load, but also it was extremely challenging. But I was extremely focused. Like, I see some guys show up on fight week and it seems like they don't really try to even make the weight. You know, you'll see them get 5 pounds, 7 pounds off, you know, which is pretty unacceptable in my opinion. And in my mind, it was like, there's no way I'm not going to make that weight, for better or worse. So it proved a lot to me of what I'm able to accomplish when I focus, when I push myself. But at the same time, there were, I'm sure, a lot of things that I could have done better to make it a cleaner, easier process, I guess.
I want to ask you probably a question that you haven't heard before. I'm going to ask you this unique question. So, you know, I just interviewed Frank Mir not long ago, and I said to Frank, I said, you know, what do you think about sex pre-fight? And Frank says, I have sex the day of the fight, right? You know, there's a lot of,
Yeah.
and I said, wow, right? And a lot of people have, you know, different fighters have different analogies. What's your analogy on having sex and a fight coming up? Like, are you going to give it a week, a month? Do you even think about that? Give us some insight on that.
Yeah, you know, it was funny. I definitely have a different take on it today than I did back then. Here's my take. Well, here's my take on it in general. I think that I don't think it's harmful before a fight or a competition. I think that, you know, and I'm not the first to say this, but it's the chasing of it that is more harmful than anything else. You know, if you're going out and you're trying to have sex and you don't have a girlfriend or a wife or whatever, and that usually means you're going out late. A lot of times it means that you're not going to sleep well. There's probably going to be some drinking involved or temptation to get drinks and all that stuff. That's where you can get yourself in trouble and on your mind and all that stuff. But sex in and of itself, I think, before a competition or before a fight, I don't think is harmful. And I think there's been some studies that says it actually raises your testosterone. So I would abstain for 2 weeks. I would do it mainly because I would find that it would make me irritable. It would make me a little, I tend to be more of a nice guy, and I kind of relax a little bit, and I would find that it would just make me a little bit hungrier, a little bit nastier. You know, it's funny. Yeah, not many people, I don't think I've had that question very often, if at all. But that was kind of a part of my mental process of like before a fight of like, hey, this is serious. And I think in taking away certain things, it made me focus more on the goal of what I was there for. And, you know, which is another reason why, you know, I trained in Boston, Montreal, and New York. And, you know, yeah, you can find temptation anywhere, but, you know, I found that whether it was wintertime or whatever, those aren't the places as much. Like if you, like for the fighters that lived in Vegas, I thought that was just a lot of temptation. So I tried to stick to places where, I wouldn't have those temptations as well.
Mm. Tell us a little bit about like going into a fight and, what you do to perform in terms of like, do you have like some meditation going on? Like, what does that look like? Give us the insight on that.
Yeah, that's another thing that has changed, I think, over time. Like, I would probably do some things different, but I did my best to, do a lot of breathing exercises. Whatever it was that I knew, I would probably change it up a little bit, but I would do breathing exercises. I would do some meditation, and I would just try to get into, I don't know, I guess I would best explain it as a spiritual state. I feel like a spiritual state of mind, I think, is crucial for a warrior mindset. I don't think it's really talked about too much in like professional mixed martial arts, but I do think it's an essential component. I think making it more of a spiritual process makes it special. It adds a certain magic. It adds a certain focus for me. So I would kind of go about my little process of whether it was lighting an incense, having my alone time for me, which I still try to do daily. And it just kind of helps me block out everything else. I want to be in a certain mind state, and I don't want other people's mentality to kind of influence that for whatever. I almost don't want to be disturbed. I almost want to be in that Mushin kind of mind state, like no mind. I'm not sure I was so great at blocking out certain things that I couldn't control. I did find myself sometimes getting stressed over, certain fight week obligations that I had, or certain things that I had to do, or, focusing on the opponent, or, it wasn't a perfect process by any means, but I did learn over time from that process to focus on the things that I can control. There's not a whole lot of things that I can control, but I'm wasting time if I'm focusing on things like, oh man, I hope this referee gets it right. Who are the judges? What are they going to do? How are they going to see the fight? What is my opponent going to do? Like, prepare yourself, but don't get lost in that, because it takes you out of your own game, I think.
Mm. Tell me about a time when you could feel that the fight wasn't going your way. Maybe you were on your back, somebody had your neck, and you were really like, oh shit, and then something snapped, you got out of it, and the fight turned around. Tell us a little bit about the mindset and what you were thinking and how you kind of processed that to kind of turn the fight around.
Yeah, I think that was really interesting. I think that during those moments in a fight, it was about getting back on track the best that you could. First of all, thinking about surviving those situations, trying not to get finished, and finding a way to get out of them safely without taking damage, without getting finished. And then, bringing him back into your game plan, getting back to your game plan, or furthermore, and this is where it's trickiest, making the adjustments on the fly. I think I had some really good people around me that helped me with that, no doubt about it. But I also think that there are certain times that I wish that I would have trusted my intuition a little bit more, that I would have trusted, whatever gut feelings I had, So I think that's important for us in a lot of different ways. I think sometimes we aren't in tune with ourselves. Sometimes we don't listen to ourselves. We don't listen to our inner self. And we to appease someone else, we do something, or we, I don't know, just kind of make a wrong move because of it. It's not a perfect process, but I do think that we should train ourselves to listen to our gut way more. And there were times in a fight, like certain adjustments that I felt I should have made, but then maybe I stuck too much to the game plan of what my coach wanted to do. So there's a balance. And it's about staying composed, believing in yourself and your ability to come back, and bringing the fight into your realm the best that you can.
Mm. Have you been in a fight? I mean, I'm sure you have actually, where, your coaches had a game plan for you. You practiced the game plan. Then you got in the fight and the game plan kind of went out the window, right? And you kind of felt like, no, this is what I want to do. Tell us a little bit about that. And were you successful? Like, looking back, do you think you should have stuck to the game plan?
Yeah, I would say the most perfect example of that was in the finale of The Ultimate Fighter season 1. Was fighting Diego Sanchez, a guy who was an absolute savage back in the day. He had a ton more experience than I did. We always had great training back and forth. And I basically, again, maybe Diego would have beaten me anyway, but I don't think that I was able to, similar to a BJ Penn fight, but even worse, I didn't show anything of what I wanted to do. Like, I literally defeated myself before I even got out there. That's when I was really focused on a lot of stupid things that had nothing to do with the fight. Like putting pressure on yourself because it's this, big contract and there was this at stake and all these people were, doubting me and I had to prove them wrong. And, it was on television. All my friends and family were watching and I had to do it for this person or that person. And that was just a bunch of BS that I bought into and made it bigger than it needed to be. The reality is, my focus should have been on Diego and Diego alone, that person in front of me, and being present in the moment. So it was that, we had all this game plan of what we wanted to do and how we were going to do it and how we wanted to keep distance. And if there was an opportunity to get a takedown, we'd do that. But I remember just circling for like what seemed like an eternity. And it wasn't probably very long, but literally before I knew I was actually in a fight and was trying to fight, he was mounted. I was bleeding all over my face. And John McCarthy was like breaking up the fight. And I was like, okay, that didn't go as expected. That wasn't good. And I realized, I had never experienced like being frozen in a moment. I had never experienced that level of fear and anxiety before. And after that fight, I was like, okay, that's what people talk about. That's what, that was a weakness. To become mentally stronger and to be able to withstand that level of pressure. So I just started reading a lot and tried to help that process the best that I could.
I just saw Diego last month and I rolled with him a little bit. Like, we were in a hotel at the Trump and I said, I'm going to see Frank tomorrow. I want you to show me a move. I might choke him out. Right. So we were just kind of playing around. And then when Diego, like when he first like grabbed me, bro, that guy is strong. Like, I was like, holy shit. Like, this guy, like, the moment he got his hooks on me, I was like, holy fuck. Like, and he just gets so into it. You know what I mean? So
he's an intense dude, man. He's one
bro,
of the
I was like,
I've ever met.
I was like, and he was like probably going like 40%, right? I was like, whoa, right? When you first like locked in with him, were you surprised at like how intense and how strong he was?
I think in training I certainly was. Like I had seen him compete. In fact, I think I had reffed a couple of his matches actually. And so I knew he was really good. And then when I locked up with him for the first time in training, I was like, wow, this kid, he knew how to move. He had great sensitivity as well. He was flexible, he was fast, and he was really strong. Like those were the things that really stood out to me for sure. And in the fight as well, like, obviously training is training and a fight is different, of course. And I definitely felt all of those things for sure.
He's in this bare knuckle league right now. I don't know if you've heard about it, right?
Yeah.
If there was enough money on the table, do you think you would take a fight against Diego in bare knuckle?
I don't think so. I always said, for me, if my body wasn't really letting me do what I wanted to do, if it wasn't allowing me to train to the best of my ability, I knew it was time. And, I retired at 36 years old. I felt like I was continually getting better. I was getting smarter. I was getting more technical. But when my body was just breaking down and my back was just messed up for a couple of years, I knew it was time. In my head, I was like, hey, maybe my back gets better and I'm able to do it. But no. And then in regards to like bare knuckle specifically, what intrigued me about mixed martial arts was the fact that you could do it all. I didn't, I don't consider myself a fighter in the way that like I'm gonna fight for fight's sake. I see it as problem solving, and I see it as let's see whose full martial arts arsenal is better than the other. And that's what intrigued me about MMA. That's what I would have done if I was healthy, I guess. But you know, being 46 years old now, you know, I'm way past my prime. I had my fun. I would have liked to done some things a little bit better. I would have loved to have won a world championship, but I really try to be very conscious of finding that time to step away. And I didn't want to be that guy that was performing at a level that was way below my capabilities. And I also didn't want to be that guy that took a lot of damage to the head. I want to be able to enjoy my family, enjoy my life, and not have a tremendous amount of physical disabilities if I could prevent that. You know, my back isn't great, my hip isn't great, my knee isn't great. So I manage it the best that I can. Those things we can kind of deal with. There's ways around it where we can make things better. We only have one brain, and as far as we know, you know, recovering from damage is damn near impossible. So, you know, that was my thought process in regards to fighting and unretiring, I guess.
Was there a fight that you went into where you, at the last minute or just before the fight, you got an injury, but you still had to fight, or you decided to fight?
Yeah,
And tell us a little bit about that injury and the fight and how you handled that.
for sure. You know, one of those cases was against Takanori Gomi. It was the main event in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was Takanori Gomi's first fight in the UFC. I had looked up to him for a very long time. I'd always wanted to fight him. In my mind, I was like, I'm going to fight him in Japan. You know, that was always my dream fight. I was given the fight in the UFC in a main event. I was honored to do so. And before the fight, my knee was swelling up. There was like water in my knee. I never knew what that meant until it actually happened. And not only was there swelling in my knee causing pain, but then I had a massive staph infection. And it was to the point where it was hard to like step on it. Like when I step with my leg, I feel a lot of pressure in my knee. It was hot. It was sore. And so dealing with that, I was a little bit worried because I knew, you know, I wouldn't be able to move and hit takedowns as much as I would like. And I had to do a lot of in and out movement because he was very dangerous and tight. So, yeah. And thank God, you know, I did well. I won that fight, was able to finish him in round 3. I thought my jab looked great in that fight. I was able to keep him on the outside, not take a lot of damage, and won in a pretty clean way. So that was one that I wasn't sure. I was facing a very dangerous opponent. My knee was all messed up, and ultimately, I think a week after that fight, I had to go to the emergency room and had surgery that day. My knee was riddled with staph. I had to get like one of those like snakes in my knee that they pulled it out and had to drain it. And yeah, that was extremely painful. But that's one of the cases. But you know, I think it's rare that you go into a fight 100%. I fought with a lot of cuts that I would just glue together. You know, injuries, whether it was my back not being 100%, like against Sean Shirk, or I remember being sick. I had a stomach issue before the Roger Huerta fight. I'm literally on the toilet and they're calling me to line up, like, Florian, you're up, like, come on. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And like, I had a tie cup and I got to take this tie cup off, and I'm just literally just keep going to the toilet. And it was horrible. And I remember I was like stark white as I walked out to that fight in Minnesota against Huerta, in a big one. And I remember just thinking, like, please God, like, just let me get through round one. I can't lose to this kid in the first round. Just like, I don't care what happens. Just let me get through round one. Like, give me the strength to do it. And ultimately ended up winning that fight. But yeah, that was interesting.
Tell us a little bit about, like, when you go into training camp right now, what do you hate the most? Like, do you hate, what is it like, there's a lot of this people doing these ice baths, like, how do you feel about the ice baths, or is there the sauna? Like, what is
Yeah.
it that you just despise?
So I would say being restrictive with my diet, like, and it wasn't necessarily like, I like variety of things, and it would just be a grind of eating the same thing over and over and over again. It would be like eggs with some peppers and like like a little cup of kefir and like a little small cup of blueberries. And it was like that was my breakfast for like 3 months, and then like my lunch would be the exact same thing. It'd be like the salad with tuna, and I really wouldn't stray from that. And then it'd be like the same dinner, like chicken breast, broccoli, and a little bit of like some kind of brown rice or something. That was my process back then. And that was just, after a while, I'm just like, I'm sick of chewing this chicken breast. It's got no flavor. It's got, that would kind of bother me. It still does to me. I think to me to this day, like that's a struggle. I used to hate cold water. Like that was one of my fears. I now love it. I take cold showers every day. I'm hoping I can get a cold plunge. I've done, two of the Wim Hof courses, a beginner and a more advanced, which I love, and I found great benefits for recovery. I would do it every once in a while with George St. Pierre when I was in Montreal. I'd do the cold plunge and then go into a sauna. I enjoyed that stuff, but yeah, I guess just the the nutrition process was tough for me, to be, if I'm being honest. But I love the training. Like I loved being in the gym, almost to like a fault. Like I would train almost too much and then have to dial it back. People would like kick me out of the gym just because I'd be, maybe running my body down a little bit too much. But I loved the training, loved the whole process of it. But I would say probably nutrition was kind of the toughest part, the boring meals, I guess.
You went out to see Wim Hof, like where is he, Iceland?
When I was in LA, this was after I retired. One of his instructors, I worked with her. She's like one of the main North American representatives,
Right.
and did a course out with her in LA, and it was phenomenal.
What was that like? I mean, I'm obviously, very familiar with Wim Hof.
Yeah.
So, what did you go through in that course?
Yeah, so they gave me like a whole protocol. They're like, in preparation for this course, we highly suggest you start with morning showers. There's like a whole protocol of like start with 30 seconds cold and then just take a normal shower after that. And then it was like 30 seconds to start, 30 seconds at the end of the shower, make it cold. And then it was like, all right, just try to take a cold shower throughout. So I remember waking up in the mornings like, man, I don't want to do this. Like my breathing gets completely out of whack. Like I'll literally like I can't even catch my breath. That's how cold it gets. And what it was to me was, it was a sign that I needed to learn about that like neurological response of stress. It was obviously induced by the cold, and I just could not control my breath. And I was like, all right, that's something I got to work on. And so I did that in preparation for the course. And then when I got there, it was a lot of breathing, a lot of talking about the science of breathing, what it does for us. There was even like, I know the advanced course, they had like a PowerPoint course. They were walking us through it. We were talking about it. We then practiced the exercises. And then at the very end, there was water in these like kind of troughs, almost like a horse trough, a metal trough. And we just all filled it up with water. And it started by us standing in it for, I forget how long it was, but I remember just standing in it. And it was so intense that it was like almost pain. It was like, a bunch of knives just going into my legs just from like below my knee. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to get my whole body in here? Like, this is going to be impossible. And then it was a process of like getting your hands in there and just staying in there for a little bit. And like, okay, I was like, that's a little bit more manageable. And I don't know if maybe we stuck our faces in there after. It was just our faces. And then that was intense. But then I remember like that wasn't as bad as I thought. And it started giving me confidence. Like, all right, here we go. We're going to have to get in this thing, our whole body up to our neck and then dip down with our head. The first go, I did not dip my head. I just got up to neck level. I stood in there. I think it was 30 seconds, 45 seconds, or a minute. I forget. But we did sets of it. And then eventually I got to the point where I think on like my 5th try, I got my head underneath the water, under the ice, and just stayed there for a little bit and then came up. My breathing was out of whack, but man, it was an amazing process. So now I can get in there and I can like smile and relax and breathe through it. But when I started, man, I had trouble.
Yeah, no, that sounds intense. Tell me a little bit about your supplement regime when it comes to, you know, going into a fight and your off season. You know, what does that look like?
Yeah, back when I was fighting, I didn't do a whole lot of supplements. I guess, I'd do a protein shake, so I'd have some kind of good whey protein. Sometimes it would be whey. Sometimes it would be, like a vegan protein. So I would kind of play with that a little bit. I took a multivitamin. I did BCAAs in pill form. What else? That's pretty much it. Oh, well, I did a recovery shake. It was like, what the heck was it called? It was like that 3-to-1. It was like, back then, it was like high carb, low protein, like 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. I'm blanking on the kind, but anyways, yeah. So I would do that after after a hard workout, typically like a strength conditioning workout, and that was pretty much it. Now that probably was my supplement routine for my camps.
Who do you look up to right now, like in terms of MMA, or like who would be, someone that you really are like?
Yeah, gosh, I think there's a lot of guys. I think one guy that I think has had an amazing career so far is Israel Adesanya. I think that for a guy who comes from a striking background and has had to face some grapplers out there that supposedly were tough matchups for him, he's done amazingly well. I think he has a lot of different gifts. He's got great charisma. And I think he's made a lot of, good decisions as far as, how he trains. He's extremely popular, but at the same time, he, continues to work hard. He's from a great camp as well. And, I just like what he represents. A lot of great fighters, Kayla Harrison, who's fighting over in the PFL. I love what she represents. I love her work ethic and how dominant she has been. And he's, there's a bunch, but, those are kind of the two that really stand out for me right now.
What do you think about Bella Mir and Frank fighting on the same card?
I love it. I got a chance to see Frank last year. Actually, he came to a PFL event. I saw Bella. I met her, and I've heard great things. I think there's so much potential for her. It's amazing that Frank is continuing to fight, man. I wish him well. He was always one of those guys that I looked up to a lot as a jiu-jitsu guy, and seeing him come in at a very young age, tapping out all these monsters in the UFC. I loved how he took a very intelligent approach. He was very smart. He continually got better over the course of his career, did great in commentary as well. And now he's guiding, his kids. His son is like a nasty wrestler in Vegas. And I know his daughter is doing phenomenal as a martial artist and mixed martial artist now as well. So that's really cool. I think about that. I have a couple kids. I don't want my kids to fight necessarily, but I do want them to learn martial arts. Like I want that to be a big part of their life. And after accruing a lot of experience as a fighter, as a coach, and I think that's one of the greatest gifts to give someone. And then when it's your own family, when it's your own flesh and blood, and you have a chance to pass that on to your kids, like there's nothing better than that, where you can bond over that and connect on that and kind of make it a family activity. Like my daughter's 4 years old and she's like, Daddy, let's do jiu-jitsu. And she'll, get right down to it. And I think it's one of the most important things that a kid can do is train in martial arts and learn about delayed gratification. And you certainly get that in other sports, but there's something special about the martial arts where you see the fruits of your labor pay off later on. And it just gives you this sense of confidence and accomplishment that I think other sports gives you. But that one-on-one competition of, defeating that nemesis across from you, that person that maybe you couldn't beat for a few years, and all of a sudden you surpass them, there's this shift that happens internally where you feel like you can take on the world. And martial arts certainly gives you that. And it's awesome that Frank is able to do that with his family and kids.
Yeah, I mean, what I found to be spectacular about Frank, I just saw him last month. I interviewed him at his gym, and I was kidding around with him, and I said to him, Frank, if I take your back, do you think you could get out of it, right? And he says, yeah, I think I could get out of it, right? So then we get on the ground, right? And I'm thinking like he's going to just give me his back or like put his neck down. He literally gives me his whole neck, right? His whole neck. He leans back fearless. I'm trying to choke him out with his whole neck. Like, no, he's not even like, there's nothing. There's like, he gives it to me and I'm out of breath. I'm trying to choke him and I can't. Like his neck is so strong.
It's like choking a bull. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I couldn't even believe it. Like it was crazy. And that sort of like fearless mindset that he has. I said, like, who would you fight? And he's like, would you fight Mike Tyson? He's like, yeah. He's like, he doesn't matter. Like he'll fight anyone. Like there's no limit. Like you could be like, the guy will fight anybody. Like I love that about him. Just that fearless mindset.
100%, man. Frank's an absolute legend.
Yeah. Did you have any questions for me before we wrap up, or anything you wanted to talk about yourself?
I guess just what's new with Nutrabolics, man. What's going on that front, and how are things going?
Yeah, things are going great. I mean, now that COVID is kind of over with, right? We're rocking and rolling. I mean, it was a little shaky during COVID, but I mean, we definitely made it through. We got a new protein bar called Feed. Right? We just launched some new flavors of that. We came out with a blueberry cobbler and a glazed cranberry, and they're exploding. Like the Feed awesome. Protein bars, I don't even know. I'll send you some.
Please
try them out. But it's literally like they come in and then they go out. Like there's we've never had a product that's selling this fast. And the big thing that's been on the horizon now for 4 years, we've been working on this, me and Rodney, for 4 years, is this hemp-infused energy drink called Thermal Ecstasy. So we finally got Health Canada to approve it, and we're in production right now. We're looking to launch it by the end of the year. I'll also send you some of those. You can try it out, but that's going to be a big, big product for us. So those two things right now, with the bars and the drinks, are really like our main focus. And then obviously we have all of our staples that are still doing great, but those are like the big new exciting things for Nutrabolics, I would say, in my opinion, that's been going on. Plus, I don't know if you knew this, but we're filming a bio documentary right now called Supplement Sharks.
Oh, cool.
And so basically I'm going, and that's why I met with Diego. I met with Frank, and I'm going and I'm interviewing people that we've worked with, right? And I'm talking about scenarios that happen, and it's actually kind of like reality TV. So it's not just documentary. There's actually like real shit happening that's like going on, shows the whole, like from the beginning, from when me and Rodney started. We started in my parents' games room, right? We were 20 years old, broke. We had nothing. I flew to Toronto and I sat in his house. He was living with like 4 strippers. He had no money. Okay. I opened his fridge, and all he had in his fridge was tofu dogs. That's it. That's how broke he was. Okay. So we tell the story, and then we meet with all the people, like a lot of the people, I should say, that we've worked with. And, we kind of like focus on stories that were a big impact. Like the reason that I kind of met with Frank and Diego is because I had flown, or I had planned an appearance for Frank to come to Canada, right? And at the last minute, Frank didn't get off the plane. So I had all these people, probably like 500 people, waiting for Frank Mir to get off this plane, right? And Frank's not answering his phone, nothing, right? Like, so I'm like freaking out, right? I can't go there by myself. Like, nobody cares to see me. They want to see Frank Mir, right? So it's like, so then I'm thinking, oh shit, who can I call that I've got a good relationship with in the UFC that's like going to get on a plane in an hour?
Right.
So I called Diego Sanchez and I said, bro, I'm going to pay you double. Get on the plane in an hour of what I usually pay you, right? Drop everything, but I need you to get on this plane, right? And just whatever you're doing, I don't care. Like, just get on this plane. I need you to save the day, right? So I tell this story because it's a true story. And Diego literally dropped everything, literally got on the plane and came to the appearance.
That's cool.
And yeah, so we kind of doing this, we're kind of telling these crazy out there stories where people are, I think, are interesting, right? And we tell that all the way throughout the movie. And we're looking to launch it probably, end of next year. But I've been working on it pretty much, every day since March. So it's called Supplement Sharks. I'm sure you'll see it coming out soon. So keep a lookout for that. We're working on that. And that's pretty much the gist of what's going down with Nutrabolics.
That's exciting, man. Congratulations.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah, listen, I really appreciate you coming on Perform. You're an amazing guest, and I wish you all the best, man.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Take care. All right. Bye.
Thanks.